Hey, it's Drybear. 2 weeks have come and went, so it's time to check in on our healer rankings for Dragonflight Season 1, Week 13. If you found value in this video, leave a like down below. It helps me out tremendously. Subscribe for more gaming content, and as always, come by my live stream. I'm live every single day. If you don't, then you're gonna lose your left eyebrow at some point in your life. We'll kick things off like we always do by looking at not last week, but the week before. We missed week 12. I was doing something in real life, so I had to take care of that, but we're back on the content train. So this is 2 weeks ago, week 11, where the healers were. Not too surprising, especially if you've been watching the MDI from this week and last week, Preservation Evoker, but there's some questions now around where Discipline Priest is, where Holy Paladin is, and what's gonna happen to Restoration Shaman. So pay close attention to Restoration Shaman for week 11 and week 13, the ones we're going to look at today, because there's some cool stuff coming for them in 10.0.5. And boom, here we are, week 13 healer rankings. This is going to be fun to look at after we get a week of 10.0.7. The patch is coming on Tuesday. We'll let a week of data go through before we look at all the parses and see where everyone's at. But I'm curious to see. I hope Resto Shaman comes up, man. They got some cool stuff coming. Holy Paladin has some big changes. It's going to make them more fun to play. In general, I think there's some good stuff in there. So let's dive into it. The number one, as literally shocks no one in the entire universe, the one that's actually setting the size and width of this graph, Preservation Evoker. They've just been the best. And if you look at the Mythic Plus MDI, almost every single group uses a Preservation Evoker. Now, you could argue that if you introduce a new class into the game, you probably want it to be good enough that people will play it and be happy with it and try it out and push it to its limits. It's probably at a limit that's higher, that's too high for everyone else. If you compare this graph to like the tank graph per se, you can see that there's those big inward juts. Like if you look at, this is Mythic Plus, Mythic Raid, and Heroic Raid stacked together. So how their performance adds up across all forms of PvE content. If you look at the right side, those big, huge juts where it comes down and there's a massive deviation from one data set to the other, you don't want that when it comes to balance. You want more of a smooth, like these classes are slightly better or worse than the previous, and obviously there's going to be a bottom, there's going to be a top, but you don't want these massive, like, sawtooth juts that go in, because it shows a disparity between classes that's a little bit too big. So Preservation at the top, there's not really anything new to say there. They have extremely high healing, and their healing is very easy to access whenever they want it. They can even store it up into their healing cannon and release that cannon whenever they want. They have good movement, lots of, very specific utility. They don't have the utility that I would say that like a shaman or a holy paladin do, but they definitely have better utility than like a mistweaver, right? Or a disc priest. So they have some really cool things going on for them that really help them in a lot of cases. They're just good, man. And on top of that, one thing that works great for Mythic Plus is their damage is so easy to access. You just do a flame breath. That's almost all of your damage, or a significant portion of it is just that one spell. It helps you heal. You get a nice heal out of it, and it procs more healing, and you just have to do it, and all the damage is there. Whereas, if you're a Resto Shaman, you have to chain lightning like 5-6 times in a row to match it. You have to dot things up as priest. There's other things you have to do to be able to keep up with that, but Preservation, I think they just made a good kit, man, and it's super good. And it I don't really know. I hope they just raise the other healers up. Preservation already got a 5% global healing nerf, and it didn't even phase them, man. Like they just kept driving through it, and it's like that nerf didn't even happen. They brushed it off. They brushed off the temporal anomaly changes. They're like, I don't care. I'm just insane. Don't touch me. Second place is still Resto Druid. This has been the case all season long. Resto Druid and Preservation being the best, but Resto Druid is actually getting back to being a normal citizen relative to Preservation Evoker. They're closer to the trend line here. If we cut Preservation off, there's still some juts there that you'd want to get rid of, but it's better as an average trend line with Restoration Druid now being there. They were 3rd overall for Heroic Raid, 2nd overall for Mythic Raid, and 2nd overall for Mythic Plus. And I would argue that's primarily because there's definitely some min-maxing when it comes to Raid onto how many of your rejubes you put out, your germinations you put out, when you use your regrowth. Are you using your Omen of Clarity properly and getting good value out of it? When are you propping your flourish? Are you using Tree of Life properly? Are you using Swift Mend at the right time? There's a lot of subtleties in Raid for Resto Druid that would lead me to believe that, you know, Mythic Raid Restoration Druid would perform higher than Heroic Raid just based on the cohort of players that are playing in those styles of content at that difficulty. So I don't think that's super surprising. We do see Holy Priest as the 3rd overall and beating out Resto Druid in that spot. A little bit easier to access. You can do your salvations. You can do your divine hymns. You can pop out very easy heals. If you're running Light Weaver, it's it's more straightforward to play. The problem the Holy Priest runs into is doing mechanics and positioning properly, because they can, it's hard for them to recover from bad positioning relative to other specs. But if you have good positioning, Holy Priest is just dominating in Raid. And the reason they're not even up with Resto Druid is just because of their Mythic Plus performance. They're towards the bottom. They're actually almost tied with Mistweaver, which is not a good place to be, because Mistweaver has historically been, liquid hot nastiness for Mythic Plus. There hasn't really been anything that changed it for them, but they're doing much better in Raid, as you can see by them being in the 4th overall slot. They are 4th in Heroic Raid, 3rd in Mythic Raid. Ever since they got Shadowlands Gift, it has made a massive difference for them in Raid. The caster playstyle works great for them. There's still people running Fist Weaving in Raid. So Mistweaver for Raid, looking great. They're still the worst overall in Mythic Plus. And there's some core kit gameplay design issues that need to be solved going into 10.1 to help alleviate that for them. They have to be more melee than even Holy Paladin. And none of the other healers really have to be in melee for that. And if the mobs move or they have to dodge mechanics, their healing goes down massively. They still have mana problems when it comes to Mythic Plus and the pacing of that. So, you know, that's kind of just where they're at. Doesn't mean they can't do it. All the highest keys can still have a Mistweaver in it. There's plenty of Mistweaver players that are insane, but just law of large numbers, when we're looking across the entire player base, they don't do well in Mythic Plus, but they kill it in Heroic Raid and Mythic Raid if we ignore the Jesus statue that is Preservation. Restoration Shaman is the 5th overall, beating out Discipline and Holy Paladin. This is because they're doing better in Mythic Plus, shockingly. They actually started the season quite poor in Mythic Plus. They've been kind of pushing up further and further, and people have been relying on them quite well. They do have some mana problems, even running Mana Shield and the new Mana Spring or even Mana Tide. They still have mana problems because they are hard casting a lot in Mythic Plus and even in Heroic Raid sometimes, but they can rely on Riptide and your Primal Cores a lot easier in Raid. But their throughput is there. They're kind of in the same boat as Holy Paladin, is that even if Holy Paladin and Restoration Shaman are at the bottom for throughput, you'd still bring them to difficult content because they provide something that no one else does, and they do it better. And it's just amazing, right? Like having a res totem is clutch. Having cleansing of poison can be clutch. Having your SLT is crazy good. It can be one of the best raid cooldowns that prevents people from dying. It's like a built-in raid cooldown plus a spot healing mechanic. It's insane. But we'll see what happens to them in 10.0.7. If you don't know, they're getting a lot of chain heal changes. It's possible that we'll see Primal Tide Core become less value, and maybe we get more High Tide, or we get more play of that chain heal playstyle, which will mean that typically that chain heal playstyle is affected by encounter. If the encounters are spread out, like Gahoon was, for example, it can hurt them really bad. But if they have more togetherness, chain heal can do really well. Underneath Restoration Shaman is Discipline Priest. Their only saving grace right now is Mythic Plus. They're doing, honestly, still pretty poorly in Raid. I'm still waiting for the Discipline Priest atonement buffs. If you're a Disc Priest, you probably have been too. I still don't understand why there hasn't been more atonement buffs for Discipline. I guess they're just happy with where Discipline is currently. I don't know. It's hard to say why things are the way they are. The changes that they got help them in Mythic Plus. They do great in Mythic Plus. Having the extra pain suppression is amazing. The cooldown changes, plus the extra healing is great. Their kit is amazing. I love playing my Disc Priest. It's just, you have to work so hard to get valuable healing throughput in Raid. And I hate to say it, but they're not a Resto Shaman. They're not a Holy Paladin. They don't bring the same tool set. You want Disc Priests to have throughput for them to have value in a Raid. And I don't think their throughput is where it needs to be. So hopefully in 10.1, we see more for them. But right now, They're great in Mythic Plus. Raid, I think they're still struggling. Down at the bottom, shockingly, is Holy Paladin. I think people are just playing less of their Holy Paladins in prep for the 10.0.7 changes, where their tree is getting reworked, their Dusk and Dawn is getting reworked, their spec tree is changing. They're getting so many things that are changing up for them. They should be really fun to play going forward, so we'll see where that goes. I'm kind of shocked to see them being lower on Mythic Plus because they were doing great in it overall. Even saying Resto Shaman beat them last week in Mythic Plus is kind of shocking to me. I would argue that if I had to choose between bringing a Resto Shaman or a Holy Paladin to a high key, I would lean towards bringing a Holy Paladin. I just would. I feel like their healing is a little more reliable in general, but you know, it all comes down to the player. But that's the ranking overall. I mean, that's where they're at. I think we still need some. We'll see where Holy Paladin lines up. I was going to say we need some more throughput for them, but we'll see where the changes line up for them going into 10.0.7. Maybe it's good. Maybe they land exactly where they're supposed to. Some big question mark changes coming for Resto Shaman that might put them in a much better spot with higher throughput, which is great. And then, yeah, there's some single target changes coming to Mistweaver. We'll see what that does for their raid healing. We'll see if that has any impact on Mythic Plus. It probably won't, but that's where the healers are right now. So rejoice, Preservation Evoker, still the ruling king and queen of the land. Kiss their crown or otherwise suck it. That's basically it. Pop on my live stream, twitch.tv/Drybear, live every single day. See you later. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.